My name is Dave Masters. I've been in product management. I did this slide originally and said 10 years, and I was like, oh shit, it's actually been 13 years. Time is like flying by, but I work for Realtor.com and one of the sub brands under Realtor.com called Doorsteps, which is kind of aimed at apartment seekers. And a lot has changed in product management over the course of my career. I heard something yesterday that was, hey, who's parachuted into this role? I parachuted in, though the parachute never opened. I just kind of landed, exploded a little, and here we are today. There's a joke. In the early days, though, like I found that we spent so much time like talking to users and trying to come up with ideas and sort of create a strategy and build something that was going to hopefully solve the world's problems, and kind of look like this, where we'd take our best guess, right, and we'd spend all this time like researching, talking to people, and then we're like, oh, okay, now we're just going to jump into build mode, and we'd spend a really long time, only to find that our user needs, they didn't get met, or maybe the people didn't want the product, and then you had MacGyver yell at you, which is awful, right? Although, I was thinking about this morning. Like MacGyver would probably find a way to make your product useful. So I don't know. So today we still spend a good amount of time on discovery, right? We talk to users. We try to figure out like, hey, what can we help you with, right? What problems can we solve for you? But rather than taking 12 months to sort of do all this research and get cranking away at building something, at the end, we start to build in kind of incremental pieces, right? And then ideally, like this thing in the end, I'm going to move, I'm going to stand in the way a little bit, but this thing in the end sort of changes based on what you learn, right? So that's sort of the promise of Agile. And ultimately, like we do these little iterations, and under each of those iterations, hopefully we're learning from that and kind of informing our backlog and improving our product overall. What happens though in common like waterfall, or in common Agile these days, and we hear about it a lot, and this notion of, hey, we had this idea, we just start building it kind of incrementally, and as part of that like incremental build, we keep our idea that was, our original idea still the same, and in the end we end up with a product that looked very similar to what our original idea is, and we didn't take the opportunity to get those sort of the learning from each of those little loops that we deliver. This probably look familiar to most of you guys if most of you are product people, but typically, a day in our life is we start with solutions and features, and we'll enter them of our tool of choice. That product craft board has a lot of new tools. I'm gonna have to check it out because Jira is awful. Sorry for anyone who works at Jira. And then, but ultimately, like we have this backlog that we kind of manage, right? And within that backlog, we deliver incremental chunks of work, and hopefully there's a little bit of value being delivered in each of these iterations. And then, we learn from that, right? So did it have the outcome? Did the things that we build have the outcome that we'd hoped for? And is it high quality? And does it ultimately resonate with our users is sort of the goal. So what is delivery? Software being shipped is what I consider it. Somewhat predictable, right? We kind of know and have a little bit of evidence on the things that we hope to build. Our developers tell us how long it's going to take to build those things. Ideally it's going to be built in good quality. Maybe there's some committed items, right? Like so everyone is like works with maybe a variety of teams. They're asking you to build some stuff. Sales is asking you to build some stuff. Your traffic team and acquisition team is asking you to build stuff. So maybe you have some stuff that you have to build. And hopefully there's evidence that suggests you should be doing this work. And then, like, how do things actually make it into the backlog, right? So you're getting all these inputs from people, but ultimately, like, where we say, oh, you have to learn how to say no, but you may not be empowered to say no. But ultimately, like, what is it that we can do to sort of help better inform our backlogs? And I always like this. This is so from Jeff Patton. If you guys don't follow him, he's fantastic. But he kind of frames this this notion of as you're thinking about items in your backlog or the work that you're doing, like how much money would you actually bet that each of those items that you're about to ship is actually going to deliver value, right? So if you're building a good case, you're building evidence, like, hey, your confidence level rises that that's going to be something that you want to build. Like, look, you start to feel pretty confident in that, then that's probably a good indicator that you should build it. If you wouldn't invest that money, like, hey, maybe you should rethink that. But that's the guy he's confident right there. But this is ultimately where discovery lives, right? So what is discovery? It's sort of customer conversations, I think, right? And sort of learning fast, experimentation, uncertainty, ambiguity. Like those are all things that sort of resonate with discovery. Like sort of challenge your bias, right? Like whatever you think you might know, like you should question that. And I always love this quote from The Fearless. It's not an experiment if you know it's going to work, right? Like this notion of every time you're experimenting, every time you're doing something like to hopefully better refine your product, if you're just sort of creating hypotheses that sort of tell the story that you wanted to tell, that's not really great. And I'm super sorry if you guys can't read some of this, but I just put up a couple of I don't know. Wade yesterday had a whole bunch of other charts, so I made my attempt to create my own here. But this notion of kind of learning sort of lives in the center of all of this work. And up at the top we have kind of your existing users and some of their unmet needs. At the bottom you have kind of existing issues within the current system, whether that's bugs, design debt. And then on the left you have kind of like new user segments. So this is a very simplified view, and I would say that this is not black or white, but just as a way to kind of help frame a story for you all. Like, I think delivery kind of lives mostly on the right side of this. That's not, it's not always true, but I think that you're sort of working on building stuff for your existing users. You're shipping stuff. Hopefully, you're keeping good health within your existing system. And then discovery kind of on the other side, right? So this notion of user interviews, experiments, and sort of talking to users, figured out, hey, is our product actually solving your needs today? And oh, by the way, your needs probably change in 6 months. Have your needs changed? And if so, are we meeting those needs? Or, oh, hey, we want to go after a bigger market. So we need to talk to different users than our current ones. So in order to do that, we have to go talk to them, right? But I think what's important is learning happens throughout all of this. And so we have to get good at making sure that we're learning, we're taking the inputs that we're getting, we're taking the insights that we're getting and actually informing our product and building it better. So, as I kind of think about the balance between the two, like delivery emphasizes sort of building and quality. And, we kind of measure that stuff in like velocity. Though I saw a speaker yesterday who said velocity is the wrong metric. He had a much more sophisticated way, but for simplicity's sake, we'll say velocity. But discovery is like, how quick can I learn, right? Like how fast can I get the answers that I need to get? How fast can I weed through ideas to sort of get rid of and discard the ones that aren't working and sort of emphasize the ones that are. I stole this. So in the spirit of discovery. I saw Wade yesterday. He did a phenomenal job. And this slide did a much better job of sort of showing the kind of parallel track between this than I did. So I just stole his thing. But I gave him credit, so I think you're allowed to do that, right? So, but honestly, like it kind of goes in parallel, right? So your work is you should always be talking to users. You should always be delivering stuff, and like you have to find a way to kind of do both of those things. And I think the important part, and the only thing I would kind of challenge about this is, sort of what the team makeup looks like on both of those tracks. Like, and that could be depending on the team makeup that you actually you work with. But I always like to have the entire team participate, depending on like if you're like a smaller group. You have like our team is made up of, we have 5 developers, a designer, a product manager, and they all participate in user interviews. They all participate in like sort of internalizing those user problems and sort of working through ideation sessions and ultimately, kind of informing them and wanting them to build the best product. So we found that model to work for us, but, it's not for everyone. So products, and for anyone who started like your own or like a new product from scratch, it starts super simple, right? It's like, oh, this thing that just kind of moves elegantly. Then it gets a little bit bigger, right? And there's like all these moving pieces, and you're like, okay, that's a lot of things that sort of could fall apart, and it's sort of a result of a kind of an unbalance of sort of delivering discoveries. In delivery, you sort of ship a lot of stuff, right? So this thing on the left becomes the thing on the right because you're just packing it full of features. You're packing it full of things. But if you go too far the other way and you just get into discovery, right? Like, what happens to all these features that you're now neglecting? You're like, okay, now I'm just only talking to people who are in a new user segment. Okay, well, what about all the people who are using the thing? Like, are you still hearing from them? Is this thing still even work? And by the way, do people even use these things? Like, I don't know. Like, I have a product that nobody uses still, and it's live. I'm sure we all do, right? I'm not ashamed to admit it. This is that forum where I'm allowed to talk about that, right? But I think like striking a balance between that work is actually super healthy and like very important to just maintain a really good balance system. So I'm going to spend just a couple of slides on talking through discovery. I think we all spend a lot of time on delivery work. Like we're all like, we have a list of stuff, it's got to get done. So I just want to hit a couple of points on discovery, and then I promise to goof on myself for a while. So with discovery work, it kind of starts with identifying a problem, and you're getting that through like talking to people, right? And define who that problem sort of impacts. Form a hypothesis, right? We're all familiar with this, and then determine how to measure like success against that. And then quickly ideate to solve these problems. So whether it's design sessions with your team, whether it's there's a gazillion ways to sort of to put together solution ideas. But then slice them up and test them quickly. This is like the hard part, right? Because like every time you see you go through this design studio and you're like, oh my God, we have this great concept, and then like a designer takes it and puts together this magical thing, and you're like, that's going to take 2 months to build this thing. Like how do we do this quick, right? Super fast. So if the goal for discovery is learning fast and burning through ideas, and we need to weed out the bad solutions, we have to be able to just find a solution that resonates really quickly, take action, and then ultimately refine the solution to be included in our delivery work. So the key here, and I would say that this is like one of the most important things, you don't spend time just talking to users, right? To not take action and sort of take your learnings and improve the product. So make sure that there's sort of that loop that constantly gets closed. Okay, so that's a smiley face emoji. It's not that fun to goof on myself, but I'm going to do it for your sake, not mine. Okay, so doorsteps. We started, by the way, by the end of this, you guys are going to be like, how does this guy still have a job? I know. So when we started doorsteps, we aimed to kind of win a single market. So for apartment search, and so there was a lot that went into determining like where we wanted to, what market that was going to be, which magical market we were going to come in and dominate, Game of Thrones style, only to get Littlefinger sneaking up on us with some alternative plan. But in our discovery phase, we researched a lot in Austin. We went and talked to landlords and renters, which you might do like in a marketplace business, right? You have multiple actors, right? So there's 2 people that you're solving needs for. We heard a lot about what both sides wanted. They wanted so landlords, they want high quality prospects. They want people who the term that we heard that I'll never forget is, I want low impact renters in my apartment. I was like, what does that mean? They're like, oh, someone who doesn't use the water, someone who's renting my like 3-bedroom for like a ridiculous amount of money and is gone all the time, so they're not putting any wear and tear on my place. Like, yeah, it's crazy. But it was what we heard, and so it all made sense. And renters, they wanted all the inventory. So above all, I mean, of course, their end goal is to rent an apartment, right? But they want to make sure that they had like all of the choices. Everyone in here has rented an apartment online, right? You've looked at like 5 different websites and cross-checking to see if the price is good, cross-checking Google and seeing if this place is legit, being scammed by somebody in Nigeria that you're going to like give them money to open up the apartment. Like, we've all gone through that, right? So, so we kind of took those insights and we said, hey, like how can we gather like enough inventory to sort, or enough high quality renters to sort of satisfy the landlord's needs, right? So high quality was kind of important. And then could we capture enough of the rental inventory so renters felt like they didn't need to go to other places, right? They're like, oh, this place has it all. And, you know, how hard could that be, like in a single city? It was I thought it would be a lot easier. I'll be honest, it was not easy. But you know, so we looked at the problem. I'm sorry, we're gonna talk about apartments for a while. So one of the things that if you look at rental inventory, if you were going to start a startup, like getting all of the listings is actually really hard. It's like non-trivial, and which is why you have to go to all those websites, because everyone has their own little niche on how they get it. But you know, we had enough because through our Realtor.com relationship, there was a lot of inventory there already. And so we were like, hey, is this enough to get going? So we started putting our listing counts up against all the competitors. We're like, yeah, if they're in the game, like we could at least get in the game. So we determined that was like a sufficient inventory to start. But was inventory enough? Like, you know, we heard from these people that said, hey, that's what we want. And I heard an interesting insight in our research that 110 people move to Austin every day, net. That's like people who've moved out, I think it's like 130 people that move in every day and like 20 that move out or something. But 110 people every day is wild. And, you know, so those people that were moving in from a new town, like, could we create something like sort of localized for them and sort of a guide to help tell them which neighborhoods they might think about looking in? And so since our other brands were sort of national in scope, they were kind of one size fits all, could we do something that maybe felt a little bit more local, and how would that work? And what did local mean? So we started hiring all these photographers and writers, and we tried to create like this site that felt super local and just jumped straight into delivery mode. So our designers got cracking. They were building like all these things. You know, we built this sort of homepage that hopefully felt local. Like it took, you know, we took all these photos of Austin. There's neighborhood pictures, and, you know, kind of spoke to our demo. And all of this stuff, you know, was testing sort of really well. But we also got into this mode of like, okay, well, how can we make this thing feel modern too? So we spent a ton of time on making this. By the way, this isn't the actual screenshot. I couldn't find it because it was a long time ago. And the Wayback Machine basically, I don't know, it just gave me a horrible looking view of it. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. But we spent a lot of time making these like map cards float all over, or these cards float all over the map. And people loved it. Like every time we did user tests, and they're like, oh my God, this thing's beautiful. Oh my God, this thing works great. And so then we put it live to people. And, you know, we went from a brand new site to about 5,000 renters in the first 2 months, which is, you know, I mean, Austin, one city, 3,000 people a month moving in, you know, another couple thousand. That was a pretty good, it was like a meaningful number. I mean, it wasn't the biggest, but it was like a meaningful start. But the users weren't terribly impressed. Why? So we skewed so far onto delivery after we formed our initial hypothesis, right? We're like, okay, now we just need to start building this thing. Like, you know, our management team was like, hey, you guys have been talking to people for so long, like show something, like builds. Okay, yeah. So we showed them screenshots for a long time. You know, we've got it out in the wild. It just didn't hit. And one of the reasons why, so we spent all this time on the homepage. Nobody even saw the homepage. What we found is that people were actually entering on the search page, so the page that actually like gives you the list of all of the rentals. If we would have had that insight a little bit earlier, like maybe we would have skipped the whole local piece, right? It's kind of sad. And then, you know, and also this like floating map magic that we were trying to make work, this thing was like, this was super hard. Like, I mean, our developers like were basically like, well, designer, why did you come up with this thing? And like, please don't do this again. And it was, I mean, it was kind of like there was a lot of like UX sort of things that went into it. It was hard. And it looked great on Thunderbolt, but our users were mobile, 80% of them, right? They didn't even see this. I was like, wow, great. Get me out of here. I was ready to quit. I swear, I was like, this is, how did we miss the mark on this? It was tough. You know, MacGyver was yelling at me again. MacGyver, God. This I never get like sick of. Honestly, I've watched it like a thousand times. It's a good reminder. But also we were so off track, right? Like our users, they cared about inventory, right? The renters only wanted listings. They didn't care about floating map cards and some other like, fluffy nonsense that like we got super attached to. And in those, so we just spent a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of just like cycles building the wrong thing again, right? So we were like, oh, we're so agile, we're so good, we're so lean, we're I don't know. I don't even know. Yeah, because like we felt good because we were like making progress and like literally just like missed the mark. So we discovered that we needed to fix some things. So we're like, okay, let's get focused on the items in the backlog. Let's just get all these fixes in. So we actually took all the local content. We put the local content on our search page, right? And so like people were like, oh yeah, now I actually see this stuff, and they found it useful. We got rid of the floating magic and kind of streamlined stuff. The system got a lot easier. And we kind of changed our ways. I would say that like we learned from that quite a bit. And our feedback loops were tighter, right? So we were taking the input and improving the product, but we still were missing something, and we weren't sure what was. So we started talking to more people again. And by the way, I will say this is part of this like discovery stuff, right? Like, I mean, talking to people, like you guys have to get that into like your working rhythm. Like we actually have OKRs now that all of our product people have to talk to a certain amount of customers every quarter. It's like, it's a really, really important. But, so what we learned is our renters were actually, they had a nice search experience. Like, yeah, the site looks great. But when they reached out to the landlord, they never heard back. It's like going to Amazon, right? And saying, hey, I'm interested in your product. Yeah, exactly. You would never use Amazon again, right? Like Amazon would not be a company. This is kind of what it felt like, and honestly, I guarantee everybody has felt this way, right? Like, oh yeah, I'm interested. Yeah, leave me alone. So we had to figure out why did these landlords, like, why weren't they talking to the renters that we were providing them? And so but we had skewed so far, right? We were like, oh my God, we're so focused on renters and getting this right for renters, we forgot the other half of the marketplace. So if we would have baked that into our learnings earlier, we would have learned this earlier and hopefully solved that. So why didn't they respond? Our whole team like basically went on another mission to sort of uncover and unpack why they weren't looking at it. And what we learned, landlords are super busy, right? So maybe they've posted their rental on Craigslist, they've posted it on a handful of other sites. They're inundated with people, right? Like, is it still available? When can I come see it? Do you guys accept pets? No, I have a snake. Like, do you guys accept snakes? Like, whatever, right? But people were like asking them stuff, and they had just a long line of people to respond to. They're like, I can't get back to everyone. So, we were trying to, so what they were looking to us for was, how do you guys pre-qualify these people, right? How do you kind of like give us a pre-check of the people, only send us the ones that, that have been qualified enough to live in my place. So qualifications are whatever. But so we discovered that was a problem with them. We ideated on a few solutions to solve the problem with the whole team. So again, the whole team was out there. We rapidly tested them. So this was one of the ideas that we had. So when we talked to landlords, they said, okay, there was a common thread that we heard. Hey, I want people who have a high credit score, and I want people who have some rental history. I want this to be someone's first apartment, and I want to make sure they pay their bills on time. So like, okay, let's just introduce like a little module that when they contact the property, we throw up a couple additional questions, right? So hey, I don't know if you can see that, but I'm a first-time renter, credit score, and it was just like self-selecting, right? It wasn't like we're going to give you a credit check. And then put together the message and then sent that off to the landlords. The beauty about this is it only took like a day to mock up, a day to build, and we shipped like just a few days after kind of uncovering the problem. Now, if we were to do this at production level, like there's a whole bunch of other people that we'd have to get involved with, like the rest of the team. Like, because when you send inquiries, like we don't have this, it's not like just doorsteps by itself. It has to go into this bigger engine. But it would have taken a long time. And so we would have had to, we thought we'd have to be right, or at least have a good case to like get bumped in priority. So we followed up with all the people who submitted all the information. We're like, hey, you've now supplied us with a whole bunch of information that landlords told us that they want. They want that pre-check. So we asked them, did you hear back? No. Right? Enter users again. So we were like, oh God. We thought we had this like super great solution, and honestly it didn't work. But we spent less than a week, right? We learned that we didn't need to change a much bigger system for something that like didn't move the needle at all, right? So like we didn't have the evidence to go say, hey, put our thing in front of everyone else's thing because this is what we need to do. So instead we just burned through that quickly, right, and moved on to the next idea. So you have to get okay with like these things, right? Like, I mean, there's plenty of ideas. I'm like, oh my God, that thing was so clever. And, yeah, users didn't think it was clever, or they thought it was too clever, and they're like, this is awful. But had this tested well, right, we would have found a way to kind of get that into our queue and put the learnings into the backlog and start to kind of get going on that. All right. Some takeaways. Dog's adorable. I know most product people are cat people. I think that's what all the conferences are cat gifts. So I don't know. So I went with a dog. I'm sorry. So one takeaway: discovery work is ongoing, and it should feed your delivery queue, right? So you should always be learning. You should always be talking to people, whether that's existing product features that you're rolling out, whether that's new target markets. Like I would say, like take a path and sort of figure out who you want to talk to and literally schedule it and get it done every week. There's so many ways, and I think like Pendo makes it super easy to be able to connect with your existing user base, right? Whether that's through capturing them once they come back into the system, whether whatever. But there's so many easy ways to capture your existing users. Getting new ones is a little bit harder, but ultimately, there's a lot to do it. So discovery work is ongoing, feeds delivery work. Get rid of invalidate ideas quickly, and just move fast. Align the team around both sets of work. So get your team who's sort of like the deliverers, and put them with product, put them with design, and have them participate in the user research. Let them feel the user's pain, right? Like every time you show a developer like a user testing video on a feature that they've done, they always go like, oh my God, they feel that pain, right? And so how do you have them feel that pain before they build the thing? If you release something without learning something, you're doing it wrong, right? Like I think of the whole thing, like that you're always going to have to go in this 2-track mode. You're always going to have to find out what's working for your users, what's not working for your users, how to grow your market. But if you're not, every single release that you do, like if you're not taking away something, like something is wrong. So you should just kind of revisit that. Don't validate things you want to work, invalidate them. This one was the hardest, right? We'd come up with a hypothesis. The hypothesis was garbage, and it was attempted to be like, oh yeah, this idea that we want to ship, we're going to find a way to prove that right. Like instead, try to prove it wrong, right? Remove your bias and sort of say, hey, this is a horrible idea because of X, Y, and Z. And your plans will likely change, so get comfortable with uncertainty, which, by the way, of all of the things, that's the hardest to explain to management, right? Like this notion of, hey, I know that you want me to hit a certain revenue goal at the end of this, or some user goal, or something. Get a little squishy on how we're going to get there, and that gets a little bit, you talk to a CFO, they're like, dude, I don't know. I have no confidence in this. But I think if you could start to build that confidence, right? You say, hey, look, we're doing good work. We're going to build the right thing, and we just don't know exactly what the right thing is. Try not to have that conversation with the CFO. Actually, get your chief product officer or someone in product to have that conversation for you. That's probably a smoother way to go. So, and it's hard, honestly. I think this is something that I think about a ton. I've been thinking about it a long time, and and even when you think you're getting it right, you might be getting it wrong, like we were, right? We constantly like, oh my God, how do we do that? But just learn from that mistake and honestly just keep pushing and keep talking to people. Like, I can't stress that enough. Like, that should be like in every product person's DNA, right? Like, I'm going to talk to 3 users this week. I'm going to talk to 3 users this week. I'm going to, I'm not going to talk to 3 users this week because I'm going on vacation, but I'm going to talk to 3 users the next week. And so if you enjoy this topic, like there's people that I've drawn a lot of inspiration from. So one that was mentioned yesterday, Teresa Torres, awesome. Jeff Patton, Marty King, and of course Wade, who was yesterday. That guy has a lot. I was looking on his website. He does a lot of stuff upcoming about this too. So you should follow him. That's it. Thank you guys. Really appreciate your time. Oh, and I guess, is there any questions? Yes. So now we don't do as much, like I would say beta. Now we just kind of put features live and just get people interacting with it in real time. Like, I mean, there's so many tools out there to kind of enable you to experiment in the real world that, that you get your best insights there, right? Because beta people might be like super early adopters versus like existing users. I think for like a new product, even a new product, like, we might just buy Google AdWords, put a landing page, like sort of lean, kind of really lean style. But yeah, I mean, for anything on an existing product, like we just disrupt the existing system by putting like a different call to action or something. So. Yeah, so the question back for the video, I forgot to do that on the last one. So the question, like you ship something, you find out that people aren't using it, do you kill it? Like, I would love to say that happens 100% of the time. We're like, oh yeah, that thing's not working, people aren't using it. So I guess the way that I'd frame that is slightly different. So I would say if we did our homework up front and we found that like this was a pain point that people had, and and we're maybe we didn't hit the mark on sort of like that particular feature. So we should, again, talk to people, figure out like, hey, is this the right thing? Maybe it's just the placement of like where the thing is, right? So I would say like you should first validate that this was something that people wanted in the beginning. And if it wasn't, and if you find that like you've tweaked it a little bit more and no one uses it, yeah, get rid of it. Get rid of it. Like we have to that's another thing we have to get comfortable with, is killing stuff that people don't use, because it just attacks on the system, right? So like your developers are now troubleshooting like a system that's broken for a product that nobody uses. So yeah, you just have to, I mean, I would say kill it, though it's hard. Nobody wants to hear that, right? Like, oh, we spent 8 months, thought this thing was like the greatest idea. We did press release about it. What if people find that press release and then we don't have that thing anymore? It's like, I don't know, who cares? Like, I don't know. Yeah, well, so that's a great question, and I'm not gonna repeat it because if I get it wrong, like I won't look dumb on the video. They'll just be like, oh, he was answering something else. No, but the fascinating thing is, right, is like I think as we do these discovery phases, right, like the biggest part is you have to kind of remove your bias. Like you have an assumption when you go in there on like what you think is going to be, and like you have to be okay with that being different than what you want. And so we've gotten better at that. And by the way, I'm not a trained researcher, and so like me interviewing people is terribly scary, with the insights that I try to glean. But I think just in general, like, we get better at it, right? We take those learnings a little bit more. with the mobile piece in particular, like that was an insight that we had. But I think once the designer started getting carried away, like on building this thing, like and they have this big screen, this big canvas in front of them, like they wanted to try to create something magical. So on one hand, like I felt excited through their enthusiasm for want to build like the best experience. On the other hand, like I was like, dude, look, if inventory is the problem, like why don't we just build Craigslist with our listing count, and maybe that'll at least be the good starting point. We didn't go that route, but yeah, I think just in general, like you have to be able to take those insights, you have to be able to remove your bias, and you have to be able to kind of take that and sort of incorporate it into your plan and into your work. Anyone else want to question? Oh, sure. Yeah, so the question was in our OKRs, we're how do we get in front of people that to talk to? So I actually think there's a variety of ways. So our existing users is actually the easiest place to start. So I think that discovery of if I were to go back to one of my earlier slides, skip through. There's a lot of slides, but where's the start over button? I'd like to walk you guys through this whole thing again. So like, the stuff in the top is probably the easiest to hit. The new users is hard. There's a lot of places though that make it easy to recruit people who might be in a new market or new segment that you're looking for, or non-existing users. But so we I think a few different approaches for both of those. For our existing users, there's people who inquire about properties. We have their email. We have information about them. We can get to them. People who sign up for alerts, or people who we have a Facebook Messenger bot that delivers listings to Messenger every day. We have those people's details, so we can reach out to those guys pretty easy. For new users, I'm trying to think. I'm blanking on the website right now, but there's a product that makes scheduling sort of users, new users, pretty easily to interview. But I don't remember the name of it. Maybe it's User Insights. I don't know. It's user something, I think. Yes, sir.
So for new features or things that you're learning in the discovery phase, you mentioned you push that straight to production. What's your process for doing that, and not mention bringing along the rest of the organization? How do you go about that? And then basically once you validate it, then you go through more of those performance.
Yeah, so the question is, as we go through the discovery phase and we get new feature ideas, how do we keep the organization informed of what we're doing? I don't know, we go a little rogue. Honestly, I think so. Our chief product officer is fantastic, and hopefully he watches this video. Just edit that piece out. But overall, I think he sort of embraces this kind of thinking, and even in our OKRs, we have a lot of kind of loose ones around validation of stuff, and so he doesn't tell us how to do it, right? He's just hey, we're going to go after this particular segment. You guys go figure out how to do it, and then come back to us with the learnings on it. So that's the way that we kind of route that up. So any new feature idea, we'll demo it to the rest of the product team. We'll demo to him and say, hey, here's what we learned out of this. We decided not to move forward because of X, Y, or Z, or hey, we're going to push for this to get into everyone else's queue to get done. So what do you mean exactly by a greenfield?
Let's say you identify new opportunity that doesn't exist within your current product ecosystem, but is still related to what's in pilots you have, your OKRs, and you're starting from scratch.
Yeah. So is the question around kind of how to slice up some of those greenfield ideas?
Possibly just trying to get a sense for if you would recommend
Yeah, so I think anything on like anything in the existing feature space is like right. It's super easy. I mean I can say it's super. It's not nothing's super easy, but like relative. It's a lot easier to kind of iterate on the existing product and optimize it. Like I think anything that's sort of like a new idea that needs to kind of come into your system is a lot harder to do that. And so the way that I'm a firm believer in kind of lean, and so I just find like what is the smallest piece to start building that and getting that in front of users as quick as possible. So I would say like any idea like that. I learned the hard way, right? But this notion of if you're actually if you find a way to kind of like get something out there and validate the value proposition, then hey, that's been validated. Great, let's move to the next phase. Like that's really the way that we go about that. And I would say that the other thing too is we're thinking about like opportunities. Discovery and delivery isn't necessarily like it doesn't sort of solve for vision, right? So you still have to have kind of like a vision of where you want to go to and kind of get alignment on the things that you're working on. So that should hopefully narrow the focus a little bit. But through the discovery process, if you notice like something that's really unmet, yeah, I would say like, hey, it's worth at least bringing it up, figure out how to test that quickly, build some evidence, say, hey, we should do this.
So once you put out the MVP there, there's always like when it's not working, there's always like this hypothesis. If we had done this also, it might have worked. And then you start like probably like reach out to people and ask the question and they say, yeah, of course. And then you keep building and eventually sort of it becomes like a full feature where it still may not work because you felt that maybe because it was not there, that's why you did something.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you like get out of that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I know we're at a Pendo conference, and so this isn't meant to be like a total plug for how we use the Pendo product, but honestly, like the way that we use Pendo a lot for the experimentation phase. So we'll put up like a new button. That button might open up like a guide, and that guide will sort of like have a promise of a product. And we'll get before we build anything, right? We're going to see if people are interacting with that at that level, and even so imagine like you have a call to action that kind of lives over here, and you test a few different value propositions. Nobody clicks on it. Okay, maybe you move that up to another spot, and then that hits people. Now they're seeing it. Maybe they interact with it more. So before we'd even build anything, like we try to go that route, right? Like saying, okay, well, do people engage with this thing? Do they find it? And then once they do find it, like, is that something that sort of resonates with them? If you go ahead and continue to build it and then ship it, now you have like management to sort of say, hey, you guys just shipped that thing. How's it going? It's like, oh, it's not going well. I think at that point you have to kind of decide like, all right, well, we can easily take this feature out, but as much as you can get those ideas validated before you build the thing, and I think there's a lot of tools to help you do that. There's another company out there that does like a split, I think they're called, kind of feature flag stuff like in the real world. And by the way, I'm a big believer in testing just in the real world as much as possible, like user testing and some of these other websites that kind of help you test these ideas with users are great and sort of like a helpful insight, but like nothing sort of beats putting real people into your system. So, yes, sir. Yeah, so we've that's a great question. So how do we what tools do we use to track our discovery work? So we've tried a variety of things. What we've found is by including everything in the same system, like people, it becomes like a talking point every day, right? So your discovery track is constantly being discussed amongst the whole team. People know what's going on in the discovery work, and it's sort of roped in with your delivery work. So I would say as much as you can, sorry, Jira. The part that's kind of like a problem though is like sometimes that impacts like velocity numbers and stuff. So you have to kind of find a way to make that work. We also did separate like Trello boards. We had a Trello board that was literally for our discovery phase, and we pull up Jira and Trello and every stand up to kind of talk through things. It's I think just kind of find whatever works for the group. But our dev team on one of the products is really held to velocity. On another product I work on, like we don't care about it at all. So so it just kind of depends on how everyone sort of their work is monitored, I guess, to make sure that you don't disrupt that. But I think like giving visibility to everyone daily on what's happening is really useful. So find a way to bake that into your conversations. All right. Awesome. Thank you guys.